Concerns have been raised over the declaration of a state of disaster by President Cyril Ramaphosa in dealing with the energy crisis. Opposition parties are worried that this might lead to corruption and looting. Well, the head of the presidency's investment and infrastructure is Dr. Kgosientso Ramokgopa, and he has penned a piece, something of an opinion piece, but rather perhaps we could term it a paper, given that it is 37 pages long, where he sets out what should be an establishment of an independent monitoring capacity for public-private partnerships in order to deal with any issues of corruption that might arise as a result of this declaration. Let's speak now to Dr. Ramokgopa to discuss this paper with him. Dr. Ramokgopa, thank you very much for your time. Let's begin with something that is slightly removed from your paper so that we do away with the speculation from the onset. Have you had a conversation with the President about potentially becoming a Minister of Electricity?
Oh, morning, Xoli, and morning to the listeners of Newzroom, and thanks for the invitation. No, not at all. I think I continue to serve in my responsibility as the head of investments and infrastructure, and I'm committed to that assignment. So any changes to the executive is a prerogative of the President, and he'll make the determination at the right time. But my focus is really on ensuring that we bolster investments into the South African economy and also address the issues of infrastructure that is under serious strain. So that's where my focus is at.
Well, I'm asking you this question simply because the chief whip of the main opposition, the Democratic Alliance, during that SONA debate yesterday, Sivuye Kwagube, suggesting that you may possibly be one of the names. If you are not, are you a member of Parliament at least? Because we know that the President, if he's going to appoint any new minister, he's got to pick from the existing members of Parliament. Are you an MP?
No. I'm just a bureaucrat serving in the Presidency in that responsibility as the head of investments and infrastructure, and also as the head of Infrastructure South Africa. So I'm a technocrat who's just lending his expertise together with the collective to help the country to recover and also address the issues of infrastructure and ensure that there's universal access and inclusive growth in the country. So the long and short, no, I'm not an MP at all.
All right. Well, let's then soldier on and talk about your paper. In the main, you are warning of economic collapse of this country. That is if the power situation is not sorted out. On what basis are you saying this?
Yes, maybe just to set out from the onset that, I make a contribution in my capacity as one of academics at the University of Johannesburg, so it has no relationship with my current responsibility. If you like, I'm a participant observer in writing the paper, and I've written a number of papers in relation to aspects of the South African economy, and in this paper I simply excavate, if you like, the facts and stats related to the cost of load shedding, to the lived experiences of ordinary people in the country. And some of those facts relate to the situation that the infrastructure is faced with as a result of the supply that is, the energy supply that is not reliable. It's got the implications on the operations of your wastewater treatment works, your water treatment plants. We know that hospitals can undertake surgery as a result. Some hospitals can undertake major surgery as a result of the unpredictability of supply. We also know that food security could be under threat as a result of sustained load shedding. We know that a lot of businesses have closed, especially small businesses. We know that the cost of operations of businesses is escalating, and as a result, it's got implications on the living cost of ordinary people, with a disproportionate impact in particular on the poor. So the point I'm simply conveying in that paper, supported by the fact, suggests that if we don't get a hold on how best to resolve load shedding, it's got significant impact on the South African economy.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the numbers, I mean, the cost of unserved electricity just in 2022 last year amounted to 500 billion rands. The South African Reserve Bank does make the point that the quarterly GDP is reduced by 2 percentage points every time when we are on the load shedding, especially stage 6 load shedding. So you can see that the numbers are dire. So it's important that we fashion a way of coming out of this very difficult situation. And I don't think that there's an easy way out, but I think there could be measures that are taken between private sector and the public sector to ameliorate, if you like, businesses from load shedding and also disruption to our ordinary lives. I mean, I'm sure with you going to work, a number of traffic lights are not working, the inefficiencies of the transport network. You can see that intersections are taken over by ordinary people who are trying to lend a hand, and that can have unintended consequences, accidents, and in some instances can result in fatalities. So if you like, the total impact of load shedding is dire on the South African economy. And I think that we should cease to look at this as a crisis, but essentially an emergency, something that requires immediate and urgent intervention so that we get to resolve it and we get the economy back on track. So really that's the thrust of the paper. Yeah. And it also articulates what are some of these interventions that have to be put in place, and it also says what is possible in the short, medium to long term, the kind of resources, expertise and skills that are required. And in some instances there could be a redesign of the macro organization of the state to make the state a bit more agile and responsive to some of these challenges. So I'm just saying that we have to be deliberate in how we deal with the problems of load shedding.
Dr. Ramokgopa, I appreciate that background. Let's then quicken this conversation because time is against us. You talk about interventions. What exactly does the paper suggest? Or perhaps let me not go there. Let me put to you what has been put forward by the President of the country through his State of the Nation address. And number one, it was to declare a national state of disaster on energy, but coupled with setting up the Ministry of Electricity. Do you think that those two interventions, or at least proposed interventions, are going to see us out of this particular mess?
I suspect that the President is going to explain today when he responds to the debate on what we really mean by the national state of disaster, because the question you need to ask is to what end. And I'm going to share with you what I think, and this is not the government position. Like I said, I wrote the paper in my personal capacity. So if you look at the energy availability factor, so the amount of energy that is available relative to installed capacity, is that we are sitting in 2021 at about 61%, and then we went to 2022, we went somewhere up to about I think 55-54%, and then as I speak to you now, we are sitting at 48%. So the quickest intervention that you can make is around the lifting your energy availability factor. So I'm just saying that's if you look at the totality of the equation, that's where the solution lies. But then if you go to ESCOM, they will tell you that the procurement dispensation regime makes it inordinately difficult for them to respond with the kind of speed that is required when they need to replace equipment that has failed, that is malfunctioning rather. They have to go through an elongated process. So my understanding is that if you are to declare this a national state of disaster, then you are going to truncate that process, allow the officials at ESCOM to procure as speedily as possible and make it possible for them to replace, if you like, the parts that needs to be replaced. And in that way, of course, you are likely going to lift the energy availability factor. I'm really simplifying a very complex dynamic, really. But the point I'm making is that the speed and agility. And the point that the paper makes, and also just responding to the outcry publicly, is that that process must not be abused. So there has to be some oversight mechanism so that there's transparency and everyone can see that the prices that whoever procured on are essentially competitive. And then there are interventions around just a focused approach in government. So if you look at the various ministries, they've got other responsibilities. So given the picture that I've painted for you, the impact of load shedding on the totality of the South African economy and the lived experiences of people's everyday lives, it is important that we have a much more focused approach, almost transfixed on resolving load shedding.
Yeah.
And I guess that's where the basis for an electricity minister comes from, but the president will articulate that. But the essence is to make sure that you sleep, eat, live the resolution of load shedding, of course, working with the ESCOM and its governance structures. Governance structures, I mean, the executive for the authority, the accounting authority as a board, and also the accounting officer in the form of the CEO, and also the executive team. So it's important that it becomes a focused approach. You elevate that the intervention so that there's an accelerated approach on how you're going to resolve the challenges that the ESCOM is facing. So that's if you like, the orientation of the paper in what is required to address load shedding in the shortest possible space of time.
All right. Dr. Ramokgopa, I want you for a moment, it's a final question, forget for a moment that President Ramaphosa is your boss, and indeed, as we are discussing, you are an academic and you are looking at this dispassionately. There is criticism that a minister of electricity is not necessary. Why do critics say this? That's because the president is running away from making a difficult decision, and that is to say, which minister is underperforming? Okay, you're fired, sir or ma'am. Why is the president, when confronted with underperformance, does he see it necessary to set up a parallel structure or perhaps an advisor? Why is that?
Well, I don't want to enter into the realm of politics. I mean, that's a political domain. And I've set out what I think from a technical point of view, an approach on how best to, at least the paper does make a concerted, spirited attempt to explain why is it that you need a focused approach. But I guess that, I mean, the question is above my pay grade. I really don't want to venture into that space. And I'm sure that today, when the president responds to the debate in parliament, amongst others, he could be responding to that question. But the point I'm making is that for as long as there's no focused approach to the resolution of load shedding, you don't alter, if you like, the dispensation on how you are going to address the issues surrounding how you procure instruments, equipment to help to improve the energy availability factor, how you are going to make interventions on the demand side. You are unlikely going to resolve this problem in the shortest possible space of time. Right. And in that period, the economy will be bleeding.
Dr. Kgosientso Ramokgopa, very, very well at evading my last question there. Thank you very much for your time.